Welcome aboard. This is the Admiral's Almanac, your leadership life connection, bringing leaders from all walks of life into yours so you can take charge, improve your leadership, and improve your life. With the wit and wisdom of your host, Rear Admiral Gary Hall.
And welcome back to the Admiral's Almanac. I'm your host, Gary Hall. Please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe and hit that like button. It sure helps out the show. We have a great show for you today. And with us is retired Rear Admiral Danelle Barrett, accomplished naval officer, leader, and mentor. She's a highly decorated and award-winning cybersecurity expert, published author of over 35 articles, and recently a best-selling author of her new book, Rock the Boat. She's a cybersecurity consultant, executive coach, corporate board director, and a keynote speaker. Interesting fact is that we were both born and raised in Buffalo, New York, and I think that surviving winters there, lake effect snow, and the Buffalo Bills Super Bowl losses shaped our resilience and our sense of humor. Welcome to the show, Admiral Danelle Barrett. Good morning.
Morning, Gary. Hey, thanks for having me on. This is going to be fun. I appreciate it.
Well, you're most welcome. It's August here in Texas, and it's about 90 degrees. Has it started to snow in Buffalo yet?
No, actually, we've been getting 90 degrees too, which for us is like melting. We're not used to that. So,
Absolutely. Now, Danelle, recently WKBW, a Buffalo radio and TV station, recently did a story on you, and it mentioned an event that happened to you at age 10 that shaped your life. Can you tell us about that?
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's so I was talking about, they were talking to me about how I got interested in the Navy because, there's not a lot of Navy in Buffalo and certainly not a lot of people, Navy vets around that you would recognize. Right. And so I had gone with I don't know if it was Girl Scouts or some group to visit the USS Sullivans and the USS Little Rock, which are museum ships downtown Buffalo. The Sullivans named after the 5 Sullivan brothers who died during World War II on a ship. And then the Little Rock, obviously named after the city. And they just recommissioned the newest LCS Little Rock in Buffalo about 2 years ago now. So, but anyway, I had gone on it was an overnight or an all day thing on the ship. And I was just kind of fascinated by it. I thought it was really interesting and just so different from anything I'd been exposed to before. And so, and it's funny, I was recently back down there doing an interview on the Little Rock, and the ship still smells the same. It smells like every Navy ship out there, a combination of sweat and, foot stink and paint and oil and grease. And it's just a lovely smell. I love it. So anyway, it was just kind of when I started to think about what I wanted to do after college, I wanted to do some sort of service, and I looked at the Peace Corps and I looked at, the military and things like that. And then I determined that, the military was really, I wanted to serve my country because I just love this country, so I thought it was the best way to go. And the Navy, based on my experience as a kid was, just kind of sparked my interest. Plus, the Navy, I love being by the water and on the water, and, and they say, join the Navy and see the world. And as you know, Gary, they're not kidding. You get to go all sorts of beautiful places like Bali and Japan and Germany and Bahrain. But then you get some places that maybe weren't on your list, like Iraq and Haiti, but still good places to visit because great people.
Absolutely. I have to key on that one comment you made. When I was XO of Tarawa, the Marine Corps colonel, the Colonel of Marines, that we had 2,000 on this ship, and he went, "Good morning, XO, can you smell that?" And I went, "Smell what?" And he goes, "B and F." And I go, "What's that?" And he goes, "Butts and feet." So
That's a Navy ship right there. God forbid the air conditioning breaks down and then the smell just is really awful.
Add a little JP5 fuel, and diesel fuel and what's cooking in the chow hall.
If you could bottle that up, you'd be making a lot of money from old ex-Navy people, right? Cologne of the day.
That smell brings back lots of memories. So you had that experience. That was around 5th or 6th grade. Did you do anything special in preparing yourself academically or whatever? Because I know you went to the Boston University. What was your academic preparation or that in high school?
Well, I did all the courses, obviously, because I knew I was going to go to college, some college, and do that. And Boston University was where my first choice, where I wanted to go. And so I prepared that way. And I will tell you, I am like mathematical antimatter. I took trigonometry trigonometry probably 4 times before I passed. I don't even know how many times it was. And I think they passed me because they got sick of seeing me come back, like a bad penny. So, and so I've made a career of avoiding calculus my whole life, actually, and proud to say I've never had to use calculus at work, so it hasn't hurt me at all. And so, but I will tell you that it was just, your normal kind of preparation. And I was always, as a kid, interested in theater and sports and things like that. And all of those things help you kind of build a team atmosphere because, you're part of a team when you do theater, you're part of a team when you do sports. And so I always tried to take leadership roles or just step out and help out wherever I was in high school. And I think that helps, even when I got a job at Burger King, you try to start doing some leadership things. And I think some people just are kind of drawn to that. And I think I was one of those. And so I was just lucky to have some opportunities during my formative years to do that. And plus my mom and dad were real inspirational in that regard too, and pushing me to, do whatever I was interested in.
And I do have to say that I think a lot of people don't understand the city of Buffalo and the culture of Buffalo. And besides football, hockey, and chicken wings, I think it's a very patriotic city, a very friendly city that people go out to help each other, and so do build teams. And it's a great city. And I think a lot of people don't realize that these parks in Buffalo, New York, were designed by the same person who designed the parks in Manhattan. And also there's some Frank Lloyd Wright buildings and other fantastic architecture. But I digress. So you went to Boston University, your first choice. Now, you did Naval ROTC. Did you have a scholarship or did you walk on?
I did not. I was actually too dumb for a scholarship. So I worked my way around that problem. It was, so when I got to the university, I started actually in January, and I had about a half a scholarship from the university, and I had to keep a certain GPA. And so I went into the ROTC unit, and I remember having a discussion with them about how I wanted to get a commission and be an officer and all that kind of stuff. And they said, well, you can apply for a ROTC scholarship. You have to do your first semester, and we'll see how your grades are and things like that. And you have to take calculus and physics. And you can imagine my cringing at that point. 4 molar suck. Oh, okay, so that's not going to work because, I figured if I take calculus and physics, because I was a history major. Okay, I was total liberal arts, right? And so I couldn't even spell STEM at that point. And so I knew that if I took calculus and physics, my GPA would drop. I might lose my university scholarship, and then I'd be out of luck on 2 fronts, right? So I said, I made a deal with them. I was like, okay, how about I take all your crazy ROTC classes and go to the drills and do all that stuff and be just like everybody else, but you don't pay me a dime, and I'll put myself through school, and you give me a commission at the end. And so that was the agreement, and that's what I did. And I worked for my room and board the whole time I was there. And I managed a restaurant about 30 hours a week. And then I took 21 credit hours a semester, basically. So I was quite a busy gal. But those kind of things, I think, Gary, when you're faced with say, you have a goal you want to achieve, right? And, my path is always the most circuitous. I mean, if there's a crazy way to get somewhere, that's the path I'm going to be on, right? Okay. So, but it's okay because it teaches you tenacity and resourcefulness and time management and all those other kind of life skills that are really what help you be successful, not calculus or physics. So I think in the end, I had much better lessons learned maybe than some other students who didn't have to do some of that stuff. But I certainly applaud them, and feel happy for them that they had opportunities to not have to do work maybe that way. But I also feel grateful for the people who helped me get those jobs, and the family I lived with, for example, as a nanny. I'm still very close with them today, and I'm just blessed to have them in my life. And they actually kept me on a year after they really needed me because they knew I needed them. And so, things work out for a reason, right?
Absolutely. And I think that leads to your that circuitous route that you talked about leads to developing your problem-solving muscles, and especially in the Navy and afloat, you need to be able to solve problems.
Right. And think on your feet too. The one thing, managing a restaurant or, even being a nanny sometimes, there's just things you just have to think on your feet, and you have to be able to jump from one thing to the next. If it's the first one isn't working out, you don't, you live with that sunk cost. You keep thinking, okay, what's a better way to do that? And I think all those kind of experiences help you mold your skills to be able to do that.
All 3 of my children worked in the food service industry, and I think it's a great way to learn life skills that translate into almost all occupations. And therefore, I'm a big tipper as well, knowing what young men and women are going through in the food industry. So at the end of Boston University, you were commissioned an ensign in 1989. Now, that was 4 years before women were allowed to enter all warfare specialties. So how did you start out, and what challenges did you face as a brand new ensign?
Yeah, so I had looked at different things that they had offered women at the time, like you could go to flight school and things like that, but I didn't have 20/20 vision, so my options there were even more limited. I'm like a blind squirrel there. You know what I'm saying? And so, and with combat exclusion too, and there wasn't any design or indication that that was going to change. So I didn't want to go into a career field that was going to be super limiting because there weren't going to be opportunities for women because of combat exclusion. So my executive officer at the time actually suggested a job at a telecommunications station in Jacksonville. And frankly, what I told her, this is ensign, brilliance, and it's 100%. Hey, I just want to live someplace warm, right? I grew up in Buffalo, went to school in Boston. I'm tired of the cold. I don't care what the job is. I'll go do whatever it is. I'll hand out basketballs at MWR. I just want to live someplace warm, right? And so, but again, people looking out for me in serendipity, which has happened to me, Gary, my whole career. I swear to God, I think people have been snow plowing things out of my way and helping me behind the scenes for years. Anyway, she helped me get a job in communications down there at the communication station, and I just kind of latched onto it right away and loved it. I found I really enjoyed it, and I enjoyed the technical side and the leadership, and that was one thing I realized too pretty quickly in that job is you could do both technical and leadership with the same job. There were some jobs, in the Navy where you could do one or the other, but this allowed you to do both. And I thought, well, but that's just great, And so, you show up day one and you're an ensign and you're 22 years old and someone gives you, millions of dollars worth of equipment and 100 people working for you. I mean, who does that for a 22-year-old with zero leadership experience other than being the burger fry lady supervisor at Burger King? I mean, nobody does that in the civilian world. And so the military is just wonderful in that way, the Navy particularly, the opportunities they give you.
When I was captain at Tarawa, when we were underway, I would go up to my helmsman, and I had both master helmsmen, both male and female, and I'd say, what are your buddies doing back at home? Are they saying, would you like fries with that? And here you are driving a 42,000-ton ship. So yeah, the Navy offers a lot of opportunity, a lot of responsibility early on. So you were a junior officer, you started down there in Jacksonville. Is this where, the challenges that helped develop your leadership? What are some of the good or bad experiences you had that helped develop your leadership as a junior officer?
Yeah, I think, with anybody who progresses through the ranks, particularly in the military, there's the school of hard knocks. I mean, there's things you learn in a really painful way that, you hopefully don't repeat and that you tell somebody else about so they don't have to go through that, right? But again, a lot of things that I did, I relied on advice from senior people, whether that was my chiefs and master chiefs who were wonderful in first class, right, the enlisted, or it was LDOs, because the communications field has a lot of limited duty officers, people who used to be enlisted, and for your audience who may not know, used to be enlisted and then transferred to the officer corps. And so they had a lot of experience that I could tap into and ask questions of. And I had really good mentors from the get-go. And that, to me, is something that's really important, is not only did I benefit over the years from what I call my mentor mesh, is probably 100 now people who have over the years, been mentors to me, and some stick with me that I had since I've been an ensign, you know what I mean? And I think that passing that on to taking the lessons they give you and passing those on to others really important. But the good and the bad, you're going to get that everywhere. So you're going to have good leaders and bad leaders, and you pull away from those good leaders that which you wish to emulate. And then you also sometimes you learn more from the bad leaders, like, hey, I'm never going to treat somebody like that when I'm in that position. I certainly wouldn't now, you know what I mean? So you learn both the good and bad from good and bad leaders, and they're everywhere. Luckily, more good than bad. But
so before you made flag officer, did you have any other developing experiences that were before you led up to commanding Naval Computer and Telecommunications Area Master Station Atlantic? That's a mouthful.
It is a mouthful, yeah.
So what other experiences did you have maybe as a lieutenant commander?
Yeah, so I think a couple of them that really stuck out for me, I worked for a lady, her name was Monica Shepard. She's brilliant in SES when I was a lieutenant commander. And what she did with a small group of us, we were doing a project to web enable the Navy back in 2000, which was really in its nascent stages, right? But what she taught me at that time was a lot of the strategic thinking things that helped me through the rest of my career, all the way up through my last day on active duty, how to align people, how to think strategically, how to think about problems at an enterprise level, how to be creative and innovative, how to influence people in a, not in a sleazy way, but in a positive way to get things going, how to do change management when you know you're going to face a lot of institutional resistance and institutional inertia, which are the evil twins that live in every pocket of the Navy, and they're out to get you if you don't know how to navigate around them, right? And so some of the skills she taught me just about how to bring it up a level, from just management to real leadership, strategic leadership were really important. And then I had other mentors again along the way, and people who just taught me. I had Master Chiefs and stuff who really taught me about the importance when you're in command, as you know, you're responsible for everything, right? And so a lot of the Master Chiefs, teach me about measured justice and how to identify someone who's got a character flaw over someone who just made an innocent mistake, and and those kind of things, and all along the way, people just giving you good perspectives on that. And as long as you're what I would call sign of the wolf, mouth open or mouth closed, ears open, and you're listening more than you're talking, you tend to learn a lot. And if you can internalize those lessons, they're really, really valuable.
Yeah, I always tell people you've got 2 ears in 1 mouth. Use them in that ratio.
That's really good. Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. I want to point out, to start thinking strategically early on is a tremendous trait, because I see that a lot of leaders, as they get senior, still revert to what they're most comfortable with. You've seen commanders doing lieutenant commanders work, or even flag officers doing things that they did as a captain. So thinking strategically early made a difference. And I want to highlight that you've said over and over again, mentors and people, plowing a path before you. And I want to share that I think you don't have to be a woman to mentor a woman. You don't have to be a man to mentor a man. And, if somebody's mentoring you, pay it forward.
Yeah, if I could add on that too, one of my closest mentors, closest friends ever in the Navy, and still to this day, I worked for him when I was a lieutenant, and then he drugged me along to all sorts of good opportunities after that. And he's still my mentor today. I bother him about stuff I do today, and he's still patient and kind and gives me no nonsense advice. And he's just wonderful. So, I think that, like you said, it doesn't matter the gender, it's just what's inside their head and their heart that matters.
No, I also have some mentors that, I've been out of the Navy for a while, and as some of my mentors, yet we still talk weekly and still give each other advice. I do more taking than giving. Anyway, you then commanded this Naval Computer and Telecommunications Master Station. That had to be a heck of a challenge, because you had 2,700 people spread worldwide. Tell me about that.
We have 2 in the Navy telecommunications area master stations. The one I was in charge of, it was in Norfolk. It's the largest one the Navy owns, and it stretches out. It's got 19 reporting commands throughout the world of different size communication stations and things like that. And they provide all the communications for the afloat units, the ships and submarines and things like that. Throughout the world. Primarily, we were focused mostly on from about Norfolk over to India, if you will, going towards Europe and the Middle East. So what I loved about that job, many things, but to be in command is the ultimate job for anybody in the Navy. As you know, you've enjoyed that position a couple times over and done real well there. And it's just a blessing. And by the same time, it's a huge, awesome responsibility, because, like if you're CO of a ship, as you know, if your ship runs aground and you happen to be catching your 3 hours of sleep, you're fired. It's your responsibility. It is one of the few jobs that you are accountable for everything, responsible for everything. You own it. And so there's never, you would never dream of saying, well, I told so-and-so to someone to do it, or someone else was supposed to do this. That's just not how it works, right? You own it. So every day you have to think about, okay, what do I do to own it and do it better? Make the mission is always the priority. I always said, you will never hear me say people are my most important thing, because the most important thing was the mission, but you have to take care of the people to do the mission. So they go hand in hand. It's not like it's one or the other, right? But the mission is really what we're talking about, because people would live or die at the end of those communication circuits, especially when we were in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so, you cannot take that mission lightly. And so Anyway, that what I loved about it was, we had sailors who were in their first job ever in the Navy, 18 years old. You wonder, like, hey, do your parents know who you are? You look so young. You know what I mean? And then, all the way up through people who'd been doing it for 30, 40 years. I mean, we had some civilians, wonderful civilians working there, and a couple of them had been there for 50 years, and they were experts. I mean, at submarine communications or things like that. And so, I mean, people just dedicated to their nation, and it was just lovely to see. But what was wonderful about it too was that everybody there, different backgrounds, a lot of diversity, brings a different perspective to the game. And as long as you want to be inclusive of that, you can really grow an organization.
Saying mission first, somebody once said mission first, people always, but it's a great leader like you that takes and balances mission and people. I once said, I forced my career to be successful, and my priorities were Gary, 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 and as my wife would then add, and Gary, and then I put faith, family, Navy in my priorities, and my career took over. But that doesn't mean mission isn't first, but it means you calculate the cost
you
of families. You find that balance.
Can I add something about that too, Gary? Like, it doesn't take grand gestures. I will tell you, like, one of the things that we used to do at our communication station is when females get pregnant, if they're on a ship, they have to come ashore, right? And we have to find a home for them. Well, if their rate or their job was to do information technology, I would tell the details. I say, hey, send them to me. That way they can continue to work in their rate and get training and things like that. And we'll take care of them while they're pregnant. And after they'd have their baby, I'd make a point to go over to the hospital and visit them and things like that. And we used to have 70 to 100 women over there. So I was over at the hospital, I don't know, a couple times a week after a long day. And, was it difficult to like drive all the way over to Portsmouth in traffic, after a 12-hour day or 14-hour day? Well, sure. But did it mean something to that person, maybe to have their CO show up and, with a little basket for their kid and, congratulate them on the baby or whatever? I think it did, and so but it doesn't take much to make somebody feel special and valued and important. And you need to look for those moments as a leader, no matter how senior you get, whether you can do it on a small scale like that or a grander scale with a policy that you might put in place for the whole enterprise or something like that.
On that point, I married a gal from Texas, and she just does things that are right. It's, and while I was CO at Tarawa, she went to the hospital many times when we were deployed to help out a young wife who was having a baby. We still hear from them, years on.
Yes.
And, sometimes you forget things you did, and people bring them back to your attention. So command is great. Now, you were on 2 aircraft carriers. What was that like?
Yeah, I was actually on a couple different more because we hopped around a lot. I was actually on the admiral's staff that was controlling the strike group. So for people who aren't familiar with what that is, a strike group in the Navy would consist of maybe seven ships, a couple destroyers, maybe a frigate at the time or an Aegis cruiser, a submarine, and the carrier. And then they would train together and learn how to operate together in case there was a mission that they had to do. And then you would go on deployment. And normally on deployment, the ships kind of peel off and do different missions and things like that. But the aircraft carriers where the admiral's staff would be, and that's where we would be during, operations. And so, I'd done deployments on a carrier, and it was wonderful. I love that. And different evolutions off of other carriers for exercises and operations and things like that. And so it's just wonderful to be on the ship. I mean, I love shipboard life. I think the only thing I don't like about it is obviously the family separation is a challenge. But I mean, there's a lot of camaraderie on the ship, and it's hard work. I mean, you work long days and you don't get days off. That's just how it goes. But that going in, and that's the deal with the devil, right? You say, I'm going to make this every day that I'm there, I'm going to make a difference so that mission operations are better, because you're there supporting somebody. You're doing some mission to support something, some national objective we have. And when they send the carrier in, they're not kidding around. That the president knows where the carriers are all the time, every day. And so it's definitely a projection of power when the United States sends an aircraft carrier somewhere.
You supported Afghanistan off the carrier, but you were on the ground in Iraq. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I remember when the war first kicked off, they were looking for people they had a lot of jobs they had to fill as individual augmentees, not going over as a unit. And the Navy was tapped to provide help too, because everybody was having to pull the load on this wagon. And so I volunteered to go because I knew they needed good communications officers, and I knew I could do that job. I had run mobile communications units in Bahrain when I was there at Fifth Fleet, and I just knew I could do that job and help out. And so I went over there, and it was definitely challenging, and it had its moments. You know what I mean? But I loved the experience in that. Again, I felt like we were making a difference, and in hindsight, who knows? That'll be debated by historians, not by me. But at the time, we had our mission to do, and we went over there and we did that, and hopefully made that better for the Iraqis in the long run. We'll see. That'll bear out over time if that's true or not.
That was my first flag officer assignment. Was an individual augmentee to General Tommy Frank's staff doing operational information, cyber stuff, and psychological operations. Quite an interesting, and like you say, history will judge what we did. But I think a lot of our experiences, we saved a lot of lives in the process. You also we're in Haiti during humanitarian actions. That was 2010 with the earthquake.
Yeah, that was what a devastating thing, and what a tragedy for that country, which already struggled. I mean, one of the things that was good in a sad way was that there were already about 270 NGOs, non-governmental organizations, operating full time there, because Haiti had so many issues in the past and needed a lot of help. And so when we got down there, though, it was just devastating. I mean, there were things that we saw that, that just didn't make the news. Like, I remember driving by the Supreme Court building, and, it was like the Supreme Court building was crushed with the judges inside. I mean, how do you reconstitute a whole branch of your government like that? Or the IRS building, the equivalent thereof down there, crushed with all the employees and the records inside. I mean, they have just huge struggles, huge challenges to reconstitute all that. But what I will tell you was the people in Haiti were just wonderful. I mean, we were worried when we went down that it might become, a peacekeeping operation if the food riots broke out or violence or things like that. But the Haitians were just a generous, loving people, and kind and patient, and they would wait in line for food and water and medical care. And they would help everybody else out. All the military that were there helping them, they were in turn helping us. And so we were, the first couple of days we were down there, we were just sleeping on the grass in front of the embassy. I mean, we didn't even have a tent. And so Haitians would helping us as we were helping them as well. So it was really a learning experience, and it does make you realize how fortunate we are in the United States. We take a lot of things for granted here, not just our freedoms and our liberties to say and speak and travel and do things, but the fact that you can turn water on. We complain about our tap water. I mean, there's people who would kill for our tap water. You know what I mean? And we take a lot of things for granted in this country. We have a lot of first world problems, rich people problems, I call them. You know what I mean? We complain when our internet's out and this, that, and the other thing. And so we just have to be grateful every day that we live in this country, and we have what we have.
I second that, and I think there's a lot of people that don't understand that's current politics that's going on right now. So what you did was you took diverse, demanding jobs and did them well, and that's what we look for in flag officers, admirals, is somebody that has taken the tough jobs, has gone to sea, has gone overseas, has worked hard, done well, led well. So then you became a flag officer. And I need to tell people out there, in your community, they probably only pick one admiral every other year, I believe, something along those lines. So you really beat the odds from avoiding calculus and physics to being selected for flag 20-some years later. Tell us a little bit about some of your experiences and challenges as a flag officer.
Yeah, and I will tell you by starting off, I think to your point, it's definitely rarefied air, and I am blessed. I am 100% lucky because, when the selection boards pick people for admiral or general, there's maybe like, say, 100, 200 records they're looking at. But then when it really gets down to rubber meeting the road, there's probably 20 records that are really super competitive, and it's going to be one of those 20 maybe, right? And at any moment during that day, the wind could have blown someone else's way. It wasn't I was better than anybody else. I was just a little different, and just whatever it was the thing that the board picked. And I am so blessed and grateful for that. I would never suggest that I had something special, because I didn't. I think I worked hard like everybody else, and I just got lucky. And what I would tell you too is that once you get that position, though, you need to make sure that you make the most impact that you can at the level that you're at. Don't be looking in your rearview mirror, right? And so what are the things that you need to change for the enterprise, for the Navy? Because you have a limited shelf life as a flag officer. You're going to serve maybe 3 to, if you make 4-star, you might serve 10 years, but most people serve maybe 3 to 6 years, and then they're on their way. So what can you do to make a difference before you make your exit, and really make a difference? What can you do to be transformational, and put your effort there? Don't get off on the red herring. Don't get off on just attending meetings or, all the kind of distractions of the day. Get something that you need that's transformational for the Navy, focus on it and do that. And so I worked at Cyber Command, United States Cyber Command. I was in charge of offensive and defensive operations, which was really a great learning job. And then I moved on to be Deputy CIO of the Navy and Director of Cybersecurity. And there I pushed a program that I started called Compile to Combat in 24 Hours to try to do some major digital transformation for the Navy, because I thought that was really what we needed to do. So again, I chose my battles really distinctly and deliberately. And so, that was a really hard project, because, the evil twins of institutional resistance and inertia came out in full force. But then I found the people who got it, and they latched onto it, and they're doing it today, thankfully, not because of me, but because of those teams of people that spun off and did it. They were doing the hard work. And so you will see change. It takes some time, but you can force it. And you can force it at a pace that people are really uncomfortable with, but you have to, gird your loins and get in there and just do it. Right. And so, and that's the important part. The more senior you are in any organization as a leader, you need to find those things. Those are the things that are transformational and make a difference, and put your effort there. Don't get off on something else.
I always tell people that are either selected for command is be humble, but don't apologize, and
Right.
when I made flag, I had to think of the Merv Griffin show. People probably listening don't even know what that, but that was the equivalent of the Tonight Show. Had Miss Universe on, and he said, "So you're the most beautiful woman in the world?" And she said, "No, I'm the one that was picked." So
that's a great answer. That's so true. Yeah.
So, so all this, you succeeded as a flag officer, and then you've compiled all this together for Rock the Boat. Let's talk about your latest book, which is a bestseller, which is 5 stars across Amazon. It's a no-nonsense leadership guide. And the reason I say it's no nonsense is because the tagline is, if a monkey can do it, so can you. So tell us about Rock the Boat, why and how.
It's funny because I wanted the title to be So Easy a Monkey Could Do It. My publisher's like, absolutely not. You're not putting that on there. So I finally thought, I got it in the corner of the top right-hand corner of the book on the front. But because I wanted the tone to be really clear from the get-go. I wanted the tone to be, how can you be a change agent, a transformational leader? And how can you do that with some practical kind of common sense advice? So I really wanted the book to be sort of like what we're doing here, Gary, just having a conversation, right, about leadership and mentoring and stuff. And I'll be honest with you, I don't read a lot of leadership books because I find them either preachy or boring, or they have mathematical formulas, which, as you know, I don't do public math, right? So, it drives me crazy when I'm reading a leadership book and someone puts some mathematical formula in there. My head is just like exploding at that point. And so I just wanted it to be something practical that someone could pick up, an easy read, but it's got some good, solid little nuggets in there that you could pull away and maybe just put in your little leadership or mentoring toolkit, your toolbox. And so I pepper it with a lot of stories too, which we call sea stories in the Navy, right? Usually, embellished with a little alcohol and some exaggeration, but in this case, they are what they are, right? But I always found too, when I was speaking over the years, just to groups on leadership or mentoring, like we do when we're in the military, that happens all the time. The same questions would come up again and again and again. And so they were always like, hey, what do I do if my boss is a jerk? Or how do I get a work-life balance? Or how do I plan my career? Or what should I be thinking of next? So they always kind of ask the same things. I thought, well, let me just throw all these kind of things, some suggestions on these in a book. And, maybe someone will be able to pick some of the nuggets out. And I try to illustrate them with stories, because I do find also at speaking engagements and things like that people will remember the story long after the leadership lesson. They'll come back and be like, oh, I remember your underwear story. I'll be like, oh, okay, great. But what was the leadership lesson there?
Right. As you say, leadership is not complicated but deliberate. And you have 3 basic principles in your books. Let's talk about those. And your first one is inspire and connect. What's that all about, and how did you come to that?
Like you talked about too, over a long career, that's what you learn over a long career is as a leader, you want to inspire people to greatness, the greatness in themselves personally and professionally, but also greatness of the organization and the mission they're doing. And so I've always found, the people who inspire me are the people who have like great unorthodox vision, but they also get something done. Like I hate the good idea fairy who like tossing out ideas like a zookeeper tossing out bananas to monkeys. You know what I mean? Oh, just pick that up and go run with it. No. The really impressive people are the ones who have the idea and then figure out how to make that happen. And, people sometimes ask me, they'll be like, well, who inspires you? And I think they're expecting it to be, John Paul Jones or some big naval hero. And, I tell them it's Walt Disney, since I've been a kid. I mean, when you look at someone who went through failure and then came back, tried again, Oswald the Rabbit failed, Mickey Mouse, obviously very successful, right? Learned from failure, moved on and had vision, continued with his vision, or went to, Florida and looking at swampland, right? And then sees in that swampland flying elephants with kids riding on them, having a great time with their folks. And then he makes that a reality. I mean, that's the kind of person I want to follow, right? I want to learn from that kind of person. Or Elon Musk, I would put in that same category, And so I think the people that are truly transformational are the ones that inspire me. And so I always tried to figure out how to inspire others. And I would never compare myself to those guys, but whatever project I was working on, how can you inspire other people to like sort of be the Pied Piper and get on your bandwagon? And then the connect piece is you're never going to do it alone. The expression, the turtle sitting on a lamp post didn't get there by themselves, right? Or a post didn't get there by themselves, right? It's so true. I stand on the shoulders of giants, as they say, and hopefully, I contributed to that as a team, because that is really how you're going to get the best result, is with a big team of folks moving forward. So they inspire and connect. That's what that's kind of about.
No, teamwork makes the dream work. But the other thing is American sailors, they want leadership. They're a sponge to leadership and to teamwork. Mm-hmm. And, for those that talk about the greatest generation, I say the next greatest generation is wearing the uniform of our country right now, those young sailors, soldiers, airmen, and Marines. So
right.
They inspire you, and you in turn inspire them. So then your next point on leadership is find 3 positives. Find 3 positives. What does that mean?
It's kind of a mindset, Gary. Sometimes we can start to beat ourselves up over our mistakes, start to look in the rearview mirror and say, oh man, I should have, why did I do it this way? I should have done that. And that can erode your confidence, right? And and it can also bring the negativity to those around you. Colin Powell says optimism is a force multiplier, and he's not kidding. If you're negative as a leader, that just brings everybody else down. If your glass is half full but half full of lemon juice, that's not helping anybody, right? So out of any situation, you should immediately figure out if something went wrong, you had a failure, whatever, the team had a failure. Look at, first of all, own it. You own it, right? And then figure out what is it that happened and how to not repeat it. Great, and then move on. Don't be looking in the rearview mirror. Don't play that movie again and again in your head. It's done. It's over. Snap the chalk line. Move on. And what positive things can you take out of that? You have to train your brain to think that way, because a lot of times we'll gravitate toward the wart or the negative, right? And so train your brain to be like, okay, what I learned out of that is X, Y, or Z. And that's what I'm going to take moving forward. And that's what I'm going to focus my team's effort on, because that's what matters. I can't change what happened. I can only change what's happening and then in the future. And so that's what those 3 positives are about.
Well, I had a great chaplain in the Navy, and he said, there are no mistakes or failures. There's only lessons, but the tuition varies. So I think that's looking at it.
I like that.
So finally, your final point of the 3 major points is my favorite, and that is don't be a jerk.
How much more basic can we make it, right?
Right.
Definition not required. Everybody gets it.
Well, I used to say, with in flying is don't do anything stupid. And sometimes you have to have a little bit more experience to understand what stupid is. But Don't be a jerk. So are there leaders out there that are jerks?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I've been a jerk in the past every once in a while too. I mean, we all have an inner jerk and we have to be careful not to let the inner jerk out, right? I mean, it's always like when you let that sarcastic comment slip because you're frustrated, or you cut somebody off because you're frustrated or something. All those bad behaviors are jerky behaviors, and you have to really make a conscious effort all the time to just make sure that you don't do those things, that you aren't that guy, in air quotes, right? And the problem with most true jerks, we all have our jerky moments, okay, right? But the problem with true jerks is that normally they don't know they're jerks. They have no self-actualization. They usually are super good at work and super knowledgeable. So they think that everybody else will excuse their jerky behavior and how they treat peers, subordinates, and never usually the boss. They usually manage up really well, and the boss thinks they walk on water and they're fabulous, and they're not looking at the toxicity of their behavior beneath them. And that's a failure of that leader, to not look at leaders underneath them to see, okay, am I getting a different face to me than my subordinates are getting from this person, or the peers are getting? Does this person have sharp elbows and not a team player, not a good shipmate, if you will, right? Because you can be really, really good at your job, and if you're a jerk, that doesn't excuse that, because, I don't need anybody around who's really, really good at their job and a jerk. I need people who are really, really good and good leaders, and the jerks can go home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I am not interested in helping those people.
I used to say, and this is, I'll say it, it's not delicate, but it's difficult to see an ass from above. And that's basically what
That is very true. That's
jerks,
true.
yeah, jerks can manage upward and then just upset everybody below them. And that becomes a leadership challenge. And I think one of the things that people should think about in a relationship, in a marriage, as well as being a leader, is tone.
Yeah. And body language, tone and body language, right? Because you express yourself. It's not your words, it's how you say your words. It's your delivery. It's when you say them. It's the facial expressions that you're giving. It's the actions that you follow up with. Do they align with your words? So, yeah, words are easy. Words are not the hard part, right? It's all the other stuff, Gary.
Yeah, I've been married 44 years, no time off for good behavior, but then I haven't had consecutive years of good behavior. But I'm still learning to work
Yeah.
on my tone and, like you say, facial expressions, body language, et cetera. And so, in other words, you never stop learning to be a good leader. In marriage, their leadership is required. It can be either spouse at any time that leads. Anyway, so how do you respond to somebody when says, "Oh, geez, Danelle, this is just common sense"?
I tell them they're 100% right. It is common sense. But what I have found is the old expression, common sense is not so common. It always shocked me when I would talk about some of these things, or say work-life balance or career, how to do goals and things like that. You talk about them and people come up and they're like, that's brilliant. I'm like, no, it's not really. It's just kind of common sense, right? But a lot of times we don't stop and critically reflect or think about them in a deliberate way, like you talked about earlier. It's not something that you can just take for granted or assume is going to happen or whatever. Sometimes you have to carve out a little time, a little intellectual gray matter being expended with a team of folks to talk about some of these kinds of things, and what actions specifically that you'll take to make the organization better, whether it's based on values or goals or whatever, the mission, initiative. You could pick any of those kind of leadership topics, right? But you got to have to be deliberate about that. And the more you're deliberate about it, the more it just becomes part of your second nature, part of your toolkit that you just exercise as a matter of routine, and you become known as a leader who does have those values. And so again, I don't think it's anything, no one's going to kill brain cells reading my book, right? But there's just kind of common sense tips. It's like the farmer's almanac of leadership, and it's not specific to the Navy or the military at all. I mean, I've written it in a way that, a manager at a Burger King or a manager at Goldman Sachs could pull some nuggets out of there, and so because those kind of concepts transcend, those leadership and mentoring concepts transcend industry, transcend generational gaps. I mean, they're just consistent.
Well, the tagline in my podcast is improve your leadership, improve your life. And this is a practical way to improve your leadership, and it will improve your life. Even just we talking about not being a jerk is going to improve your life. But now, again, I think our humor was developed because we needed humor to survive life in Buffalo, New York. So how do you feel that humor fits in?
I think humor fits in hugely because humor diffuses very tense or awkward situations a lot of times. Now, okay, if you're right in the middle of a nuclear weapons launch, you're not going to be putting a lot of humor out there, right? But there are times when something happens and humor can quickly diffuse that and show your humanity and show your vulnerability too. You know what I mean? I'll give you an example. One story was I was briefing in the Pentagon, and it was a brief that should have been a meeting that should have been an email probably, but I was briefing something super technical to non-technical people, and I really try to make an effort to put it in language that they can understand. Now oftentimes in our STEM world we do what's called dolphin speak, e to each other, and everybody doesn't even know what the heck we're talking about, right? So you want to talk in terms that your audience can understand. And so, like I said, I had probably, 100 people on a VTC, a video teleconference, and there was probably, 50 people in the room. A lot of senior flag officers and senior leaders in the Navy were in the room. And I was supposed to say systems and technical architecture. But what I ended up saying instead, because I am from New York, as you noted, and my mouth moves faster than my brain most days, I said the testicle architecture. And man, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. Everybody was just like cringing, and they're like, "Oh my God, did she just say what I think she just said?" And at that point, it's it's the turd in the punch bowl. I mean, you can't pretend it's not there, right? And so I was like, I immediately said, okay, in your mind, you have a split second of how you're going to react in a situation like that. So I said, okay, humor, try a little humor here. So I was just like, hey, what the Admiral meant to say. And everybody started laughing because, and then I went on, I said, now that I got your attention, I said, I didn't know what it took to get your attention, but now that I know, I'll use that in the future. Right. And so anyway, we went on with the brief, and honestly, could I have beat myself up about that and thought about it? Because it was cringeworthy. I was embarrassed. Right. But could I beat myself up about it for a long time? Yeah, sure. But did I know? I mean, my friends tease me about it every once in a while nowadays, but the reality is most people long forgotten off their radar. They don't care. It's just an incident that just passed by. And so I'm not going to beat myself up about it. If no one's going to remember in 3 years, why should anybody else? So anyway, again, humor can diffuse awkward situations sometimes. And then everybody, they see that you're vulnerable, and they see that you can just move on from a gaffe or a failure,
Yeah, and it just shows your humanity, as you said. So, managers do things right, leaders do the right thing, but I think great leaders like yourself does the right thing in the right way. And so I think putting this in a book is really going to make a difference for a lot of people that pick it up. So you're a wife, a mother, a daughter, an aunt, a woman of faith. How do you balance all of that while you're with a 30-year Navy career? How do you find balance?
Well, first of all, I have an awesome husband. I couldn't have done anything without my awesome husband. He's just incredibly supportive, and my daughter too. And the one thing I'll say too is my daughter's a professional ballerina, and one of the things that I always made sure of with both her and my husband is that they could achieve their goals too. Right. And because it's not just about me, like you're saying, Gary. It's not just Danelle, right? It's like, okay, Danelle, Vasco, and Haley. It's three. It's three of us. And how do we all get to do what we want to do? How can we make choices that allow us all to be, realize our dreams? Because that's what that's what matters. And sometimes it meant that I was deployed or I was away from them while they could be somewhere where they could do what they needed to do or whatever. But it requires extra work, but you have to do that because you have to have that core team at the end of the day. If you don't have some sort of work-life balance, Gary, you're going to be the guy hanging out in the Navy Exchange swapping sea stories with some other guy. And you don't want to be that guy, right? I love them to death, but they don't have a lot of the things going on. You want to be someone who's got, people around you who still want to be around you after 30 years. And if that's the case, like my daughter we just still talk every day. And to me, that's the measure of my success, not making Admiral or all those other things. And the true measure of my success is, when somebody comes up to me and says, hey, you probably don't remember me, but you're the reason I stayed in the Navy. That to me means more to me than my terminal pay grade, which I'm very proud of and happy for, but is really secondary to all those other things.
Oh, no, absolutely. I still get phone calls or connections through LinkedIn from sailors from 20 years ago. And
Isn't it
I
crazy?
always
Yeah.
tell them, I said, you just made my week. But I do have,
Yeah.
I had one Master Chief contact me and said, Skipper, I remember when you had me on the starboard elevator and you said, Master Chief, you take care of your business, I'll take care of mine. And it made all the difference in my tour on Tarawa. And I'm going,
Oh,
I don't
wow.
have any idea or memory of that
Yeah, right?
conversation.
But it meant
So
something to him.
there's so many,
That's right, Gary. Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. So what do you miss most about your naval service?
Actually, I miss nothing. I mean, because I'll tell you, I keep in touch with my Navy friends. I still contribute ideas back to the Navy. And even though I've moved on, the Navy's in my rearview mirror. I'm off doing other things now, which is exciting and fun and different. And the things I truly missed in the Navy, I started missing as a captain anyway, because the last time you get to deploy on a ship is probably when you're a captain. In my case, for my career field, or being boots on ground in Iraq or in Haiti, and those kind of jobs are what I really loved. And those are really in your rearview mirror once you make flag officer. For the most part, you're in the soul crushing Pentagon fighting budget wars or policy wars or other kinds of wars, if you will, and not as fun. So necessary work, I get it, but certainly not as fun. So again, I think I don't miss the Navy because when I move on, I snap the chalk line and move on. I don't live in the past, but I keep in touch with my friends, and that's really my shipmates. That's what I love about the Navy, that they're always your shipmates for the rest of your life.
And I try and give that message to commanding officers at the commander level and the captain level. Don't worry about the next step. Enjoy every second of command and doing what you're doing now.
Yeah.
And I'll tell
Yeah.
you, for an aviator in the flag ranks, those of us that had command of ships, we were a subset of brothers and sisters.
You were snowflakes, yes, for sure.
Yeah. So, and those were always our favorite tours, and I could go on about stories about that. But anyway, Rock the Boat. Where can we get a copy of your book?
Well, it's in bookstores now, so like you could get it Amazon. You can order it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble or kind of the major booksellers, and independent book dealers have it too. But Amazon's probably the easiest, I would say, or Barnes and Noble.
Now, do you have a website that people can take a look at and find more about you?
Yeah, sure. It's just DanelleBarrett.com. And I also have a blog that I post daily mentoring notes on. It's a Facebook group. It's actually for interaction, not just a blog. But so it's a Facebook group called Mentoring with the Admiral. It's on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, but most active on Facebook. So people can jump on there and join in the conversation if they're interested in mentoring as a topic and leadership.
Super. I think you'd be you are a great keynote speaker. How can folks get a hold of you for their organization to have you speak?
They could just either through the webpage or through the Facebook group, just shoot me a message, instant message, and I can get back to them, and or an email from the webpage, and I can get back to them.
Danelle Barrett, what an honor to get to know you and to have you on this show. And as I said before, Boost Buffalo, it's good for you. Do you have any final thoughts?
No, just thanks so much for everything you're doing just to bring leadership thought out there. A lot of times we don't take time during our busy days to stop and reflect and be deliberate about our leadership. And, podcasts like this that you're doing, Gary, are really important, I think, to have people just, have a discussion, make time to take a breath and think, and think critically about leadership and mentoring. So thank you. And thanks for having me on.
Super duper. So Danelle Barrett, Naval Officer, Admiral, inspirational leader, mentor, and author. Thank you for being on the Admiral's Almanac.
Thanks, Gary.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Admiral's Almanac with our special guest, Rear Admiral Danelle Barrett. Danelle's approach to leadership is a no-nonsense approach. As she says, it's so simple, a monkey can do it. Her book, Rock the Boat, is available now on Amazon. Her audio version is also available now on Audible or wherever you get your audiobooks. Both versions are enjoyable, filled with humor, sea stories, and practical advice to improve your leadership today. I'd like to thank my many listeners for their positive feedback. Please subscribe to the Admiral's Almanac wherever you get your podcasts. Until we meet again, here's wishing you a happy voyage home. Go Navy.